Today on Voice of the Valleys, we're going to be venturing into the quaint Welsh retirement town of Rhyl, where it has been unearthed that a gang of foreigners have been systematically exploiting and raping children and doing a bunch of other heinous things that we're going to be talking about. We're also going to be talking about officials in the Catholic Church saying that Trump's necessary, in my opinion, security measures of mass deportations of illegal immigrants is akin to Nazi Germany and slave catchers. I kid you not, ladies and gentlemen. We're also going to be talking about supposed National Socialists on the march up and down the country, the protests going on in the UK at the moment, and they've been on the march in Melbourne, allegedly. I'll explain why I think that is nothing more than a Psy-op propaganda campaign. And we're going to be discussing who really owns the UK, in particular London, because it does not appear to be the British royal family. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, friend of neighbourhood, far-right thug, enemy of the state, Mr. George Cresswell. He's not popular enough for that at the moment still. But thank you to all of those who, upon me leaving the link to the video about basically what was a Hezbollah training camp going on in the Peak District, on X, I put the clip. I put the clip in one of the comment sections on X, and a bunch of people went and viewed it. The views on that video skyrocketed. So thank you for all of those who've gone and checked that out. I hope it's helped increase your understanding of what's going on and the fact that all of these things are operating all up and down the country. We're in severe danger because our government has enabled this. They want this. And if you think we've seen rivers of blood already, that it's going to get a hell of a lot worse. It's going to get a hell of a lot worse unless we really start doing something. And part of that's going to be uniting and standing together. So something which I think we should be uniting and standing around together, somehow people still find themselves on the wrong side of this issue, is the mass epidemic that we have of foreigners operating in gangs in this country and systematically, often for ethno-religious reasons, abusing children. And we're not just talking about, just like the lower end of child abuse. We're talking about some of the worst things that we've ever seen. So the worst crimes that we've ever seen that I've covered time and time and time again. Right, I've covered time and time again. There was the elderly gentleman that was on Andrew Gold's podcast. We looked at that podcast extract the other week or so. It was a young girl. Now she's never going to be able to have children in the future because some of the things that these disgusting animals did to her. All of the political correctness stuff around it as well, with the police arresting fathers and all of this stuff. But now we have in Rhyl, which is, for those of you who don't know, never been to Wales before, maybe only been in the cities like Swansea and Cardiff, which are now hubs for this stuff going on again. If you think that they're not going on in Cardiff, they very, very much, and Swansea and other places, they very much so are. There's been documented cases of things going on, or at least things that have been reported in the media. Now in Rhyl, a nice, quaint Welsh town, which basically, when you think of Rhyl, you think of one of those towns, one of those very small towns on the Welsh coast or on any coast of any land, where basically your elderly go to retire. Your elderly go to retire and live out the rest of their days in peace as they approach more and more of the winter of existence, right? That's what you think of when you think of Rhyl. It's not a business hub. It's not a big city. It's not like a holiday destination unless you just want to go somewhere for a nice quiet, time away. Other than that, it's basically just a retirement town. Okay, very, for the most part, elderly population. We went up with me and my dad went up for a road trip up there during one of the heat waves we had in the summer about 2-3 years ago. And we actually got stuck on the side of of a carriageway in Shropshire, which was quite funny. But we went up there and we were buying something. My dad was buying something off this elderly couple. It was a nice camper van, and it was when we were driving it back was when we got into trouble on the side of the road where the bloody thing wouldn't start. But again, it's very quiet. It's you go there to relax, right? You go there typically as an elderly person to relax, or you want to get away from the hustle and bustle of daily life, right? But it's a retirement town, However, in a town, by the way, or in some aspects of Rhyl, which is still heavily dominated, and this is a key stat which I want to go into with this, because it's also going to play a key role in an incident in Japan we're going to be talking about, where seems to be where these people turn up, stuff like this is very soon to follow. This is an example from a constituency, Rhyl Southwest, that somebody shared on X. It shows the demographic makeup of one of the areas in Rhyl. And as you can see, the Asian British or Asian Welsh population is still 95% plus, right? Is in the 5%. Sorry, the native population is still in the 95% plus. That's what I meant to say. Keep getting them confused. So, because more often than not, when I see graphs like this that people have shared on social media, it's indicating how much things have shifted with regards to the demographic. And usually it is native Welsh are in the minority. So that's where I'm getting confused. But no, the Asian British or Asian Welsh, whatever the hell that means, is less than 5%. Less than 5%. And yet we still have instances of this stuff happening. We still have instances of this stuff happening, which is very, very concerning indeed. Lines up very well with cases from Rotherham and stuff like that, however, Operation Stovewood, as we talked about before. But what actually happened? So 4 have been charged as part of an investigation into child sexual exploitation. So what we're looking at now, this is part of, I believe, 2 operations, Operation M-Bank and Operation Zirconium. I don't know what the hell these names have to do with anything. But anyway, 4 individuals, all lovely, just as Welsh as you and me blokes, have been charged with some heinous crimes, right? So we have Mustafa Iqbal, 42. We have Mohammed Usman Arshad, 35. We have Zayaullah Badshah, 24. And we have Jaswanda Singh, 60. All of these based in Rhyl, right? So the first one, Mustafa Iqbal, has been charged with 3 counts of rape, 3 counts of sexual assault, 3 counts of inciting a child aged under 16 to engage in sexual activity, 6 offences under Section 1 and Section 2 of the Modern Slavery Act, conspiracy to supply Class A and Class B drugs, possession of a firearm. Remember when we were told, oh yeah, give away all your guns, you'd be so much safer, because somehow the criminals won't have them. And breach of a slavery and trafficking risk order. So, for a little bit of context, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about this because the Section 1 and Section 2 of the Modern Slavery Act is going to be coming up as we go forward a little bit more in this. So, and this is just from Google, by the way, so go and make sure you check this yourself. But for example, according to Section 1 and Section 2 of the Modern Slavery Act, oh, here we go. So this is actually from the CPS guidance document. Here we go. So, Modern Slavery Act came into force on 31st July 2015. And Section 1 applies to slavery, servitude, and forced or compulsory labour, right? So thinking of slave labour and keeping somebody in a location without their consent and against their will, those kinds of things, keeping somebody in slavery and basically forcing them to work for you. And then Section 2 relates to human trafficking, actually relates to human trafficking. So, for example, the Section 1 is not actually defined in the 2015 Act, or at least slavery, servitude, and or forced compulsory labour are not defined in there. And this is quite a long document to go through. But obviously, if they're keeping someone in a place against their will and forcing them to do things that they don't want to do, that would count as some kind of slavery, especially if it was some kind of labour. But obviously, we know what they were keeping them and forcing them to do in this instance, right? Same things that likely the same things that they were doing to the victims in Telford, victims in Rochdale, victims in Rotherham, all of these other places, right? You also have then, as I said, Mohammed Usman Arshad, charged with rape, 4 offences under Section 1 and Section 2 of the Modern Slavery Act and the supply of Class B drugs. Badshah is charged with 2 counts of rape, 4 offences under Section 1 and Section 2 of the Modern Slavery Act and the supply of Class B drugs. And Jaswanda Singh is charged with 2 offences under Section 2 of the Modern Slavery Act and the supply of Class B drugs. So just morally upstanding people of the community. Don't you just feel so enriched by having these people in your communities? But they appeared at Llandudno Magistrates Court on Friday, the 8th of August, and have all been remanded in custody. They will next appear at Mold Crown Court on Friday, the 5th of September. Further authorization has been given to charge a female with offences linked to this investigation, and she will appear before the court next week. A 61-year-old man from London was also arrested as part of the investigation, but has been released on bail pending further inquiries. So, The investigations involve 3 teenage female victims who made reports in relation to a series of offences in Rhyl and the surrounding area between April 2022 and March 2024. Hope we learn more about, because if this was able to, go on for this long, this is a 2-year stretch, right? And nothing was done. Hoping we're not seeing things in the North Wales police, the kind of levels of corruption that we're seeing in other police institutions, other police departments up and down the country that we've been seeing in, as you know, I believe it was Rotherham, where the officers that have, Yvette Cooper has been accused of blocking the investigations into these officers, as Rotherham is the area that's been affected. I'm hoping we're not seeing the same in North Wales, given the quality and the other things that have been brought in, especially with policing, to directly diminish the quality of the policing that we have in this country, DEI initiatives and all of these things. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not making any allegations, but I wouldn't be surprised. Detective Chief Inspector Rich Sidney of North Wales Police said, "Our priority is always the protection and support of victims, and this investigation is no exception. We urge anyone who has experienced abuse or who is concerned about someone who may be suffering to come forward. You will be listened to, your report will be investigated, and we will ensure that you have access to the support that you need." I'm hoping that's true. I'm hoping that's true, obviously. I think everybody should be hoping that that's true. We have very, very little reason to trust the police at the moment with the instances that we've seen where the police, in one of the places where girls were being systematically abused by Pakistani men in the majority, where you had a girl, I believe it was a 12-year-old girl or a 14-year-old girl, I can't remember exact age, I think it was 12, where she'd been initially raped by a Pakistani man in a graveyard, and then because the police didn't do their jobs properly and told her to go away and sober up, by the end of the night she was then raped by, I think the men by the end of the night were in double figures at that point, because they'd all taken her to different houses and done what they wanted to her. And then the priority of the police was to try and force a contraceptive or morning after pill on her rather than deal with the actual problem right at the time. So again, we have very little reason to trust the police. The victims of these things have very little reason to trust the police, when in many instances it seems that the police are actively in on it. And this is what shows when the police and government in particular have nothing over their head to keep them accountable. And that's why, again, I hate to go banging on about this, because, again, people can accuse me of whatever, of being a hypocrite or, being a bigot or whatever. But this is what happens. This is exactly what happens in Deuteronomy 28 when people turn away from God and stuff like that. But anyway, this has been a complex and long-running investigation. We have liaised with the Crown Prosecution Service throughout the process, and this collaboration has resulted in authority to charge the suspects involved with multiple serious offences being provided. We would now ask people to respect the judicial process and avoid online speculation on this case. Sorry, too late. This is to ensure the integrity of the investigation and court proceedings. Again, it's always these things when it is one of these instances where it goes against the narrative that our governments have been trying to push the last 30, 40 or more years with diversity and stuff like that. When it goes against that narrative, we've got to be careful not to prejudice the trials and all stuff like that. When it is any other instance, when it is a native British person and stuff like that, all of that stuff goes out the window. So again, I think of this just as more of a, political reasoning to try and stop people from talking about it more than anything. Obviously, contempt of court and prejudicing trials, as far as I know, is quite a, serious thing. Obviously, it should be taken seriously, but we've seen how these things have been weaponized. And again, when you erode trust in these public institutions like this, when especially something as important as the police, where they are in charge of keeping people safe from things like this, protect and serve, is possibly the order, keeping order in our community is possibly the most important thing, right? At least definitely one of the most important things, if not the most important thing. And it just shows what happens when these institutions are corrupted and turn evil in many instances, which is what we've seen. We've seen many of these instances of police officers themselves, and obviously institutions, when they cover up for criminality and cover up for evil and all of these things, they turn evil themselves. And it's not good. Woe to those who are in a position to do good, a position of charge with doing good, and they use that to do evil. That's like one of the most evil things that you can do. And in this instance, when the victims are in many instances people's defenseless young daughters, the young girls in the truly disgusting stuff. Truly disgusting stuff. But we'll see what happens with that more going forward. Biggest point with this is, ladies and gentlemen, is if you live in a quiet town like I do, a relatively quiet town anyway, used to be a really bustling mining town until, Maggie Thatcher had her way and stuff like that. It does seem, and this is why you should be wary, and why, it's a sad truth that stereotyping exists, and stereotypes exist because they point at some kind of uncomfortable truth we don't want to admit most of the time, or something we know is true, we're just, for some reason, not supposed to say, is that wherever these people turn up, this stuff seems to follow. Wherever these people turn up, this stuff seems to follow. And then you mix that in with the supremacist ideologies that exist in a lot of the places where these people are coming from, especially with the hardline or very fundamentalist extreme interpretations of Islam and those kinds of things that give way to ISIS and all things like that. I'm reading a book at the moment, I believe it's called The Last Girl. It's written by a Yazidi survivor of ISIS. And let's just say it's a blood boiler. Let's just say it is a blood boiler and a difficult read. I'm only about halfway through it at the moment. Nadia Moraz, I can't remember how to pronounce her surname. My brain's not really functioning that well today, so I'm needing my caffeine fix. But I'm reading it at the moment. It is and I'm going to be breaking it down in more detail. I'm going to try to be doing once a month at the moment and uploading them to Patreon if those who are interested. I haven't quite got it all finalized yet, but I'm definitely going to be doing at least one a month, one book that I'm reading every single month, to give you guys some extra content if you wanted to support the show in an additional manner, which I really appreciate. I appreciate everybody that watches, likes, shares, comments, all of these things, right? Thank you. Thank you very much for obviously doing that, for watching the show, for enjoying it, I hope, backing me and all of those things. As I just try to make people aware. I don't want, people in my communities to have to suffer the things that are going on throughout the world when it could be prevented. And, if that means I got to make a few enemies and lose a few people that aren't ready to admit it yet, then so be it. But as I said, does seem, sadly, that wherever these people go, this stuff seems to follow. So this was in Japan. Japan, by the way, has its own list of problems, but Japan, if you look at it, is a tremendous culture, right? Tremendous culture and a tremendous people. You need to look at the ambassador for Japan that comes over to that comes over to Britain every now and again, and he's arguably more British than even some British people, or at least, he's not actually, but he truly loves this culture. He's like a giant teddy bear, right? And Japanese people for the most part, truly amazing people. You find very few people, outside of what was going on in the 1940s and stuff like that, and throughout history, that have a very bad thing to say about the Japanese, at least now anyway. But this is what happened in Japan recently. There was a Pakistani migrant in Japan. You wonder what the hell is he doing there? And he's been arrested for trying to rape a schoolgirl. And this is in Tokyo. So here's the footage of that arrest, ladies and gentlemen, just to bring it up on screen for you now. Just do bear in mind as well, this is in Japanese, so I have no idea what this person is saying.
警視庁によりますと、パキスタン国籍のアフザル・ムハンマド容疑者は先月、東京八王子市を走る JR 中央線の車内で高校2年の女子高校生の胸を触るなどのわいせつな行為をした上、終点の高尾駅で女子高校生を電車から降ろして駅近くの茂みに連れ込み性的暴行を加えた疑いが持たれています。
So there we are. This is happening everywhere at the moment. The point is, if you point out these things, that there's patterns, if you engage just basic survival instinct at this point of pattern recognition, you're now labeled as everything under the sun, right? You're a Nazi if you notice basic patterns, right? That people turn up, even just in lone wolf cases like this, but especially when they turn up in greater number and in groups, this stuff follows. You're now labeled as everything under the sun for noticing it, right? And there was another case of this happening, I think this was fairly recently, or this was last year, but it's only just been shared now, of another instance of this happening. This is in Oldham now, which Oldham, as we know, is one of the capitals, one of, sadly, the pardon me again, the rape gang capitals of Britain. you know, right up there with Telford and Rochdale and Rotherham. A man, Pakistani descent, loitered outside of a gym before kidnapping a lone woman at gunpoint and raping her. And I'm going to read some of the details here for you, ladies and gentlemen. But again, this is the kind of harrowing stuff that we're talking about. And again, wherever these people turn up, which is what's going to lead us into our next story, where, you know, in this instance, there's been a lot of these people coming across both legally and illegally. But what does the Catholic Church have to say about all this stuff? Seemingly really, really not good stuff. At least a lot of the church leaders, not all of them, but a lot of them. Remember, they have Arslan Nawaz, 17, had cycled to the car park in Oldham at around 6:30 a.m. and waited until the woman arrived in her car. Makes you think, what else was going on that he knew that this woman was going to be turning up to the gym at this time? If he knew who this woman was and he had his eye on her for maybe a little while because, you know, maybe thought she was physically attracted and stuff like that, and it ignites this bestial desire in him, right? But to know her routine, to know when she's going to be leaving to go to the gym and when she's going to be walking outside of her car, when it's likely going to be dark and when she's going to be alone, most likely, because most people who go to the gym at that hour of the morning, they're going alone because only, you know, most people then tend to go later on in the evening, right? Most people don't tend to go to the gym. There's a lot of people that go to the gym early on in the morning. But, you know, most sort of, you know, group fitness classes, stuff like that, they tend to run in the afternoon and the evening and stuff like that, right? But to know her routine makes you think, was this guy stalking her? This guy stalking her for a while before this? That's what, at least what I'm thinking, when he knows her routine and knows where to be when she's going to turn up in her car. And he was seen on CCTV loitering around the area as she parked further away from the entrance to the gym. Due to the time of day, she was alone as she got out of the car. Nawaz approached her and told her to hand over the keys to the car whilst brandishing a knife. He then ordered her into the back seat as she pleaded with him to let her go, told her he would kill her if she shouted or tried to run. He drove them to an industrial estate before getting into the back seat of the car where he kissed her. And summarizing the case, the presiding judge said Nawaz left the woman with a bruise to her neck before ordering her to remove her clothes and putting on a condom. Nawaz then raped the woman as she wept, telling her to, quote, shut up and stop crying. After the attack, he demanded her mobile phone and used her sock to clean the interior of the car. He then arrogantly kissed her before leaving with her phone. He was later arrested and found to have put his SIM card into her phone. The 17-year-old was convicted of rape and possession of a knife, in the following trial. Here is the lovely cultural enricher for you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, people like this do not belong in the country. People like this, at this point, you know, for crimes like this, the only fitting thing to do would just be to take him at the back and put two in the back of his head. But at the very least, he should be removed from the country and told that he will be met with an inexpensive bit of metal flying at him very, very quickly if he chooses to return. Which, again, I think is far too lenient at this point. I think is far too lenient. I think at this point, with the scale of the problem that we have, with the scale of the rape genocide that this country has been through, literally the only just thing, you know, basically, why are these people still allowed to draw breath? Why are the Rotherham rapists and any other rapists of children, you know, that done it for ethno-religious reasons, allowed to still draw breath? Why? Why are they still allowed to draw breath? It's truly, truly disgusting. But then you say anything about this. Say anything about this, ladies and gentlemen, and this is why we've talked about quite a lot now on the last couple of episodes about seemingly at least, moral cowardice within the church. And I know I'm not alone in this because I see other prominent Catholics in particular. I bring up Deacon Nick Donnelly a lot for calling out a lot of this stuff. And it was actually him that I saw posted this that led me to read on more into this. And I think this is nothing less than disgusting. When you see how Western nations have been ruined by mass immigration, usually for the reasons usually for the reasons of slave labor and stuff like that, so they can bring in a bunch of these people that will work for a lot less and ruin the job prospects for Americans or for British people, because they'll work for a lot less, they'll drive the wages down. Companies then make a lot more, they're loving it, but then the regular British people are priced out of a job. But not only that, they can't get a wage to live on. They can't get a wage to live on. So all of the taxpayers are being fleeced in housing these migrants in the hotels. The migrants don't need to take care of any of the stuff. They get their hygiene taken care of, they get their healthcare taken care of, they get their rent taken care of, food taken care of, water taken care of, all of these things taken care of, so they can work for a lot fucking less. They can work for a lot fucking less. It's the taxpayer and the regular British person that's getting shafted at every single turn, but the Catholic Church. In this instance then, when we decide that we're going to try and sort the problem, and sadly that means upsetting a lot of people and sending them back to the countries that they came from, they then compare it to, compare ICE deportations, in this instance, talking specifically about America, to Nazis and slave catchers. Truly, truly disgusting. And the Catholic Church, a lot of us want to support the Catholic Church, right? Remember them calling the Crusades and all of these things. Remember when the church stood for strength and stood for principle? But now they're parroting the globalist lines, seemingly. So US bishops, is unsurprising that this should be from a very liberal state, I believe. I believe this bishop in this case is from Los Angeles, I believe it is. Where is he? I'm just trying to find it. I did read it. Anyway, it says here, so this is from Breitbart, US Catholic bishops are citing Nazis, slave catchers, and replacement babies as they try to slam President Donald Trump's popular immigration policies. The bishops are also urging open borders, parroting cheap labor demands from business groups, and pretending that illegal immigrants are not illegal. Or legal migrants, sorry, are not illegal. One bishop is even endorsing President George W. Bush's, quote, any willing worker migration policies as an alternative to Trump's pro-prosperity policies. So Bishop Mark Brennan, the Bishop of Wheeling Charleston in West Virginia, is the one that echoed these, or put these slave catcher and Nazi arguments across, saying, I believe, this is what he wrote in his diocese, according to an August 7 report. That defense was not allowed during the Nuremberg trials of Nazi war criminals at the end of World War II. The judges held that a soldier, guard, or official who authorized or engaged in gross violations of human rights was personally responsible for his acts. We, the people, should also remember our history. The Fugitive Slave Act passed by Congress as part of the Compromise of 1850, an attempt to calm the tensions between slave states and free states, required not only local police but ordinary citizens to assist federal marshals in returning escaped slaves to their southern masters or face heavy fines and jail time. Again, point being, however, is that the people, and also the slaves in many instances that you could say exist nowadays, are the children that are directly being trafficked because of the open border policies, right? To the 325,000, right? And when he's pushing the open border line, got to remember that when it calls for Christians, I'm not speaking as this as any kind of authority, it's points that I've seen other people in authority within the church make, and one that I've sort of extrapolated a little bit, is that when the word says, for example, to make disciples of all nations, that implies that nations have to exist, and that would mean that they are at least somewhat distinct from each other due to having different ethnic peoples there, different ethnic makeup, and that certain groups are going to be indigenous to those lands. And those are the people you have to make disciples of. And as a result, you would have then, you know, churches set up in those areas that are all part of the one big church body of Christ's church. But they would still be somewhat distinct from each other. You cannot make disciples of all nations without nations. And if you decide to remove all of the borders, right, say that we're going to have no borders whatsoever, you basically just made one giant nation. And that to me, I don't know what it is. That to me is just akin to the Tower of Babel story. Tower of Babel story in Genesis, where they tried to make something that was so big as to rival the heavens, so to speak. And I know in the Tower of Babel is talking about verticality, but then what did God do? He came down and cast them all out, cast them into different languages and different places and stuff like that. Just seems to me as though there's an interesting parallel there, where you're trying to make something so large and so, vague and seemingly shallow as well. Because when you look at these nations, they have their depth, they have their history. When you try to meld them all together, they all lose that depth. They all lose the individuality, right? They all lose their own respective cultures, right? Which can be turned and aligned towards the good. You look at Poland, for example. Poland is the one, for example, in Europe that stands stronger seemingly than any other, maybe Hungary as well, in their Catholic faith. And you could make the argument that that is largely because they have strictly enforced the border in putting armed guards with guns at the border and getting the military up on the border. When people have tried to cut through the border into Poland, the military have been on them like that. As a result, Poland is extremely safe. But the elites don't like it because they want to enforce diversity on Poland. They want to make it look more like France or Germany. It's been torn apart by mass immigration and this open border ideology. And it looks like something, out of Sodom and Gomorrah. A lot of these places do. A lot of our towns, a lot of our cities look like something out of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's no coincidence for that, in my opinion, that it's directly come from these open border policies because of the people that you let in. Again, remember, ladies and gentlemen, hell has open borders. Hell has open borders. Heaven has very strict border controls. We should always remember that. We should always remember that. And we should always be very skeptical then of bishops, priests, whoever it is, that want to toe this kind of line. Especially, they want to make all of the draws on Nazi Germany, all of the stuff that's really not holding any water anymore. People are seeing through it. People are not afraid now to openly praise Hitler anymore. Many instances. People who never would have before, mind you. People who never would have before, because of how much either moral cowardice or incompetence or whatever has been displayed on the part of church leaders, has been put through our institutions by design. I'm sorry, I have a really itchy nose, ladies and gentlemen. The room that I record in, let's just say it's not the best room to stay in for long periods of time. I'm not on the white marching powder, I promise. I'm on the white monster here, not sponsored. But I'm not on the white marching powder, I promise you. It's other things that are probably in the air in this room. But anyway, I kind of lost my train of thought now. Oh yeah, with how much there's been this moral cowardice and how much there's been this, refusal to really call things out, refusal to stand on principle, seeming to go along with this politically correct line and go along with the globalist talking points line, people have become very, very disillusioned. In many instances now, I think that's partly why they turned away from the church, or seemingly turned back towards certain, aspects of the church, more towards things like orthodoxy, which seemingly have not faltered in many ways in this line, and not given their souls over, so to speak. So let me just read a notification that came up on my phone. But as I've said, the Catholic Church, as far as I know, outside of certain people like Deacon Nick Donnelly and stuff like that, they refuse to talk about the dangers of Islam in our countries. They refuse to talk about the dangers of mass migration. They refuse to talk about the dangers of Islam. They refuse to talk about the young girls that were systematically trafficked and raped by grooming gangs, all of this stuff, right? They refuse to talk about it for whatever reason, refusing to even name militants and ideology that are involved, right, when these terror attacks happen. Refuse to even talk about it a lot of the time when their own structures and own institutions are attacked, right? Refuse in many instances to defend themselves or to point the finger at the people that are doing this, seemingly. I've heard rumor that this was conducted, the point which at the video I'm going to show you next, was done by North African migrants. That's just a rumor. That's unsubstantiated. That's just a rumor. But this is part of a much much larger pattern, right? It's part of a much, much larger pattern. This could be any number of things, really. You know, because Catholics, Christians being persecuted all throughout the world right now. This was in Spain. Cordoba Cathedral has been likely, I don't think it's been corroborated that it is arson, but likely is arson. This is, pardon me, one of many instances you see churches in France going up pretty much every other week or every other month. Churches all over the world seemingly just mysteriously catching fire. You very rarely see that it is a mosque catching fire. But churches going up like there's no tomorrow, as if they're all of a sudden storing firelighters in them. So this was Cordoba Cathedral. This was posted a couple of days ago. As far as I know, the church has said nothing. So luckily, firefighters acted very quickly to control the blaze. And as far as I know, the cathedral didn't come down or anything like that. The church is spending so much time going on about this, going on about Gaza, and I get it. The war in Gaza is not something that really anybody likes at this moment in time, right? I don't think anybody's really happy with the way that it's going at the moment. But then why don't they, for example, I talked about it before, where Cardinal, I've forgotten his name, wouldn't even mention Islam or Islamists or anything like that when they're talking about this. You have ISIS soldiers beheading Christians in Mozambique, for example, burning churches and homes in a silent genocide, as reported. This is in Fox News. Islamic State affiliates burning churches and beheading Christians in Africa's Mozambique, Congo. So here is this a video? I think we might have a video that we can watch in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just seeing if it's going to load. Former US diplomat sounds the alarm on ISIS fighters beheading Christians in South Africa. I dare say we'll be seeing some things similar on our shores, ladies and gentlemen, because Robert Jenrick has been sounding the alarm that a lot of the people coming across on the boats have alleged to have been ISIS militants. So this is, you know, not out of the realm of possibility that it's going to be coming for us in the near future, and stuff like that. But here is, for example, ladies and gentlemen, Fox News have a really, they have a really awful thing with the way they do their videos. So here, as an example, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be coming from Fox News now, where it is a former US diplomat sounding the alarm on Christians in Africa in what's been described as a silent genocide.
Well, what we see in Africa today is a kind of silent genocide or silent, brutal, savage war that is occurring in the shadows and all too often ignored by the international community. We see rampaging jihadist groups from West Africa, and even in the south in Mozambique. So that's a tremendous challenge that we're seeing occurring now. The fact, for example, that jihadist groups are in a position to take over not one, not two, but several countries in Africa, take over the whole country or most of several countries, is dangerous. It's very dangerous for the national security of the United States, let alone the security of the poor people who are there, Christians or Muslims or whoever they are. The goal is...
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what's been going on here then? So the Middle East Media Research Institute, or MEMRI, a counterterrorism research nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., is sounding the alarm about what it describes as a silent genocide taking place against Christians. The Islamic State Mozambique province recently released 20 photos boasting of 4 attacks on Christian villages in the, whatever you say, Chayur district, I think that's how you say it, in Mozambique's northern Cabo Delgado province. MEMRI said the photos show ISIS operatives raiding villages and burning a church and homes. The images also allegedly depict the beheadings of a member of what the jihadists consider infidel militias and 2 Christian civilians. Rampaging jihadist groups celebrated the killings. Photos also showed the corpses of several members of those so-called infidel militias, according to the Institute's analysis. They say here, quote, "What we see in Africa today is a kind of silent genocide or silent, brutal, savage war that is occurring in the shadows and often too ignored by the international community. Often too ignored as well by the very Catholics who used to stand against this stuff, that saw, we see, you know, abuses going on the same level as what was going on, or maybe even worse, is what spawned the need for the Crusades, right? What spawned the call for the Crusades in the Holy Land. Yet nothing's even being said. The Pope, cardinals, whoever it is, have, as far as I know, still never ever said a word specifically for the hundreds of thousands or millions of young girls that were sacrificed on the altar of multiculturalism. On the altar of multiculturalism and diversity. So, frankly, a lot of us, we've had enough. Frankly, a lot of us, we've had enough. We've had enough, and for a lot of us who want to come back to the church as well, for the church seemingly showing that it is either, you know, cowardly on these issues, or that it is directly parroting them because they've been taken up by the same forces as well, that I find very hard to believe are good, holy forces. Yeah, I'm not an expert, but, you know, I have a brain, you know, just about right. And that the church, as far as I know, again, all of this is as far as I know, seemingly very silent on when pro-life demonstrators get attacked, for example, or why they're putting all this focus, for example, on Trump and his, in my opinion, as I said at the start, necessary security policies. Right? They're just a matter of national security at this point. And now it's, funnily enough, these policies being implemented, there's only now a lot of these children that have been trafficked through the open borders of the Biden administration, 325,000 or more, and now actually getting the help that they need, because he's actually just given the authority to, I believe, use either military or special forces against the cartels, bringing people across the border. So yeah, we're going to be seeing some problems actually solved, hopefully, by that. Still no Epstein files. But again, I think pretty much there's nothing more we're going to find out about it, to be honest, which is very, very sad. Again, it will be a black stain on the administration, that one. But this is footage that came up a little while ago, ladies and gentlemen. This was published 2 days ago on X. It's from Libs of TikTok. Patrick Bryce was caught on video violently assaulting and beating two elderly pro-life advocates outside of Planned Parenthood to receive 0 jail time. So this person, when it's part of the left, when it's in favor of their political initiatives, in this instance, is sacrificing and mutilating and murdering babies, right? Perfectly fine. You get 0 jail time. Very similar to what we see in this country. Speak up against the grooming gangs, go to life in prison, rape a child, more often than not, you're going to be perfectly fine. But this is the kind of injury that this elderly man was left with because of this unhinged leftist scumbag decided to attack them. Put it on mute. So he got tackled to the floor there, as you can see. So empathetic, these leftists, and he's beating the shit out of him when he's on the ground. And he soccer kicks him when he's on the ground. The Love is Love crowd showing that, again, for all the talk about, they say that love is love, and they tried to lecture Christians by saying love thy neighbor and all of this stuff. Yeah, you just soccer kicked an elderly gentleman when he's on the ground. I'm sorry, I won't be lectured on morals by these people. I won't be lectured on morals by people that support the destruction and mutilation and, you know, dismemberment of babies in the womb when they're still alive, right? One of the most awful, disgusting things that we can do, one of the most awful, satanic things that we can do, you know, that is straight out of something that the Canaanites would do. God, you make the Canaanites blush. We make the Canaanites blush with the level of human sacrifice that we engage in nowadays as a society. But this is the Love is Love crowd showing that love only extends so far. We love is love everybody that loves what we love. That's what they always mean. But there is not all doom and gloom, however. There is not all doom and gloom. Although you might be forgiven for thinking it when you see things like this. So, again, why aren't the church speaking about this, for example? Newly surfaced footage identifies Texas Arlington Mayor Jim Ross at an LGBTQ festival yelling at a Christian preacher. I don't believe he actually says this, but the quote is, "I'd fuck your old lady in the ass." Pretty sure he says something like, "Do you know what it's like to fuck your old lady in the ass?" Or "Would you fuck your old lady in the ass?" or something like that. Truly disgusting stuff, right? But again, this is the empathetic left, right? This is the love is love, you know, accept everybody for who they are, their authentic selves, except when you say things that they don't like. Right, except when they say things that they don't like. So this is from Carlos Turquios on Twitter, but it's also from the Dallas Express. And this is the video for you now, ladies and gentlemen, which I'll bring on screen for you.
You do.
Not gonna happen.
You punk motherfucker. You don't think anal sex is good, do you?
No, it's not the purpose.
Have you ever fucked your old lady in the ass?
Who would do that?
I fucked your old lady in
That's
the
why
ass.
you're here with them.
Watch your language.
Hey, shut your ass! Hey, shut your ass!
So he takes the megaphone also and screams in this guy's face. Again, the love is love, be nice crowd, be kind folks, right? The ones that put the love hearts say be kind, right? And then what did he say? I'll put it on screen for you one more time now, ladies and gentlemen. The guy simply says, oh yeah, it's not the purpose. You know, sodomy is not exactly good, right? It's his opinion. He has epistemic authority. Or, yeah, I think it's epistemic authority and for how, why that may be the case, right? Either way, freedom of expression, all of this stuff, right? A lot of people from the left, they say, oh yeah, they're pro freedom of expression, so you actually exercise your freedom of expression, and then they do things like this, right? But here it is again, if you missed it, ladies and gentlemen.
Do you?
No, it's not the purpose.
Have you ever fucked your old lady in the ass?
Who would do that?
I fucked your old lady in
That's
the
why
ass.
you're here with them.
Watch your language.
Bear in mind as well, you'd be, again, the point being, public servant, right? Mayor, public servant. Mayor Jim Ross, public servant. And this is how these people think. This is how drunk on power you get when you decide that you're going to cast off God and things like that, right? He thinks that he still looks in the mirror and thinks that he's the good guy for speaking to one of his constituents, seemingly. I don't know if this guy is actually one of his constituents. He might be a preacher that's coming from out of town or whatever. Who knows? I don't actually know. But as far as I know, this person would likely be in his, this would be part of his community, right? Now, I know there are people that preach using speakers and microphones and stuff like that that go all up and down the country that they're in. You know, they go to different states. Young Bob, for example, in this country goes to Speaker's Corner. He was in Plymouth recently, I believe he was, and, you know, getting attacked by Muslims left, right and centre, the poor boy. But that's the price you pay for standing against evil. He's a very courageous young man. So seemingly this guy would be part of the community. And if you remember a little while ago, Mike Amesbury, how drunk our politicians have become on power and on the evil forces that have taken hold of them, that they think they can scream in their constituents' faces. They think like Mike Amesbury has the authority to punch one of his constituents in the face and punch him on the face when he's down on the fucking ground, simply for asking him a question. Right, we covered that a couple of weeks ago. So again, or well, a couple of months ago maybe. This is disgusting. This is disgusting, and this should be a clear example of how evil our politicians in particular have become. They could do a lot. They could do a lot of good by actually returning to the good in a lot of ways. Speaking of returning to the good, and this is why you should always have hope as well. People are taking things seriously. You have Spain, for example. Spain, I believe this is, it might be the military, I'm not sure, because there's a helicopter involved. But presumably that would mean it was actually sanctioned by the Spanish government, which is a good thing. They have installed, according to this video anyway, reinstalled a cross on the highest point of the Pyrenees mountains, which again is one of those things you see and it fills you with a little bit more faith and hope. So I'll bring that video up on screen for you now. It's the Spanish Civil Guard placing a cross on the highest part of the Pyrenees mountains. I'm going to put it on mute because I got a feeling it's going to get copyrighted because of the music. So as you can see, they're bringing the cross in. Seems to be of good size. And this is the Pyrenees mountain range, which you'll see coming down now. In a moment, we'll fast forward the video just a little bit. It's at 3,404 meters, and we'll skip it forward just a little bit. So there you go. There you go. Now you can see the cross being mounted on. In fact, I'll make it a little bit bigger for you. There we are. So you can see the cross being mounted on the Pyrenees mountain range there. So again, little things like this give you that little bit of hope that there are bigger things going on. Why in the Catholic Church talking about this? Why in the Catholic Church talking about this, for example? Because many of them sadly have been ideologically captured by the same leftist disease that has taken over many others, and taken over many other churches as well. So we've been covering as well now. There's something slightly different as we start to round out towards the end. We've got a couple more stories to go through. Why I think that what you're about to see next is, again, part of similar psyops that we were seeing going on in America with regards to what I believe they called, I think they called it Patriot Action, right? You know, you had these different groups that were popping up. There were supposedly National Socialist groups, right? Or supposed fascist groups that were popping up and going on marches and stuff like that. This is allegedly, again, I don't know much about this, but this is in Melbourne, in Australia. And you're going to see now a video of a big procession of what appears to be all men. And they're dressed all in black with balaclavas. They're dressed all in black with balaclavas. And they're holding signs. They're holding an Australian flag, but they're also holding a sign that says, "White man, fight back," with a person dressed in all black with a balaclava on it. There's actually one man at the front whose face is exposed, but they've got like drums. They've got, snares, which they're wearing so that they're hitting them as they're marching down the street. But this was at 1 a.m. This was at 1 a.m. on, on a street in Melbourne. And again, I have my suspicions about this, but here is the footage for you now, ladies and gentlemen. So as you can see, very large procession of men walking down the street, chanting something, hitting the snares, playing some kind of beat, right? And this supposed National Socialists parading through the street of Melbourne at 1 a.m. Makes you wonder, why would this be at 1 a.m.? But also, this should be eerily similar, ladies and gentlemen. I could be wrong, to what was going on in America prior to the last election, prior to Donald Trump being inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States. See if I can pull that up for you now. Let me see if I can find it. Because it's quite stark. Right. It's not like any of the protests which are happening that in Britain, for example, in the US that were happening. Here we go. I think this is one of them. Here we go. It's not like any of the protests you're seeing going on in the UK at the moment where you have concerned parents being brought in, or protesting rather, and doing so simply because they're scared for their children's futures, with the men being housed in migrant hotels and stuff like that, right? I'll play you some footage in a little bit of one of those that's happening recently where you can see the difference. But this was the kind of stuff that we talk about in America, why I think that this is very eerily similar to what we saw going on out there, which were very, very likely, I think it's a massive Psy-op and, propaganda effort. Very, very likely, if you had to ask me, federal agents that were doing this kind of stuff. So, pardon me. This here is one of the groups, Patriot Front, it was called, a so-called or alleged Nazi group that was marching through Washington, D.C., heading towards a March for Life that was occurring at the time. This is back in January. So here was what was going on with that supposed Nazi fascist march. So you notice a pattern, right? All of them wearing face coverings and hats. All of doing everything they can to hide their identity. All looking very similar. Despite the fact that I saw some people sharing memes at the time that was showing that these uniforms, the khaki bottoms and the blue tops were very similar to what the feds were hearing at the time. And somebody created a meme saying, guys, when you do these protests, make sure you just change out of the uniforms, right? Again, very suspicious. Very, very suspicious. And why I'm very suspicious of what's going on with the supposed National Socialist protest that's going on in Melbourne. So again, why would they do it? at 1 a.m., surely they'll have a better, what do you call it? Better reach, better presence if they do it in the middle of the day. They're doing it just to be an inconvenience, in which case they're not going to be doing it to the benefit of people, because people at 1 a.m. are trying to sleep. So they're not exactly going to be getting many people on this side by doing it at 1 a.m. No, I think it was purely for the cameras. I think this is purely for the cameras, and I think this was state orchestrated, if you ask me. Because if you look at what was going on in this country, for example, this was recently what went on in Manchester. I'm just trying to find the video that I'm looking for. This, in contrast, there's not really any good videos. There's not really any good videos, unfortunately. Let me see if I can find one a sec. Right, I've managed to find one. I'm not sure where exactly I paused that, because obviously you guys will just see it as a slight jump cut. I managed to find a video in the end. Apologies, ladies and gentlemen. I couldn't find any of the videos that I talked about last time on one of the episodes. Go back and find the ones I talked about it before. I think I did. And all of the videos I can find now are just like they were recorded on like potato quality. I don't know what the hell is going on. Honestly, the video quality of some of these videos has just been absolutely terrible. There was a really high quality one before. I don't know where it's gone now, but this is good enough to at least see what I'm talking about. So this is a march from Britain First, who have been described as, fascist, neo-Nazi, a Christian nationalist group in the UK. And they had a recent march in Manchester for immigration. Now, tell me the differences you see between these supposed, National Socialists and stuff like that, right? And a lot of the protests you see going on now, one of the ones you saw in Epping recently, which I've got some other photos of and stuff like that, which I'll see if I can show in a little bit. But this is what happened in Manchester recently, where the big bodies, media, etc., and on the left are trying to group these people, just these regular people like this, which you'll see, in with these supposed fascists and neo-Nazis. So they're chanting Britain First, fighting back, if you can't quite hear it, by the way. But as you can see, there's no face coverings. Now they're chanting Keir Starmer's a wanker. I definitely agree with the sentiment. But you can see here, lots of flags. Lots of flags, right? Flags of the nation, right? Of Great Britain, of England, right? No face coverings, no uniforms. Nothing like that. These are just regular people. These are the difference between these two kinds of marches, these two kinds of things, right? Which is why I'm very skeptical when you see things like this, when they're all in the same uniform. It's like they've all been brought together for a particular purpose. It might be a fascist group. Who knows? So one of the articles that has wrote about this is supposed nationalist protesters parade through Melbourne CBD chanting "White man fight back." A massive group of supposed nationalist protesters marched through Melbourne's CBD for almost an hour on Saturday morning, bringing late-night traffic to a standstill. Around 150 metres of the National Socialist Network, an activist branch of political organisation White Australia, paraded along the city's busiest streets just before 1 a.m, accompanied by a drummer. The group, who dressed all in black and wearing masks except for leader Thomas Sowell, chanted "White man fight back" and had a flag bearing the same slogan carried at the front of the procession, along with Australian and National Socialist Network flags. Supposedly this guy his name is Thomas Sowell, like I said, but he's part of another article on this website. Prominent Australian nationalists Blair Cottrell and Thomas Sowell were raided by two teams of dozens of armed federal and interstate police over a baseless accusation that Mr. Cottrell made a Nazi salute in front of a Muslim woman. Officers from the Australian Federal Police, Western Australia Police and Victoria's Police's counter-terrorism unit carried out search warrants at the Melbourne homes of Mr. Cottrell and Mr. Sowell at 7 a.m. on Wednesday morning, detaining them for hours and seizing their phones. So it could be legit. It could be legit, right? I would just say be very skeptical of this stuff, because the establishment especially is above no tactic to try and discredit just genuine people. So if these people are really, really bad people, right, full-on National Socialists want to bring in the Fourth Reich and stuff like that, that's not what the vast majority of people protesting in this day and age want. That's not what the vast majority of people protesting in this day and age want at all. They just want their families and their children especially to be safe, as I will show you also now. One of the protests that was recently going on in the UK, again, another difference between these kinds of protests with these supposed National Socialists and the protests you're seeing, for example, in the UK and stuff like that at the moment. Here's, again, another example of the kind of protest that's going on in the UK at the moment. People are protesting outside of asylum hotels because they're concerned with the safety of their children. Again, let me know the differences you see between the black masked up guys who are more Antifa looking than anything else, and these people who they're trying to lump, who the establishment are trying to lump them in with.
Beautiful, what up?
I just realized the song that they're singing. I'm going to put it on mute. Because I just realized the song that they're singing. Probably going to get copyrighted. These are just women, by the way, if you're listening, ladies and gentlemen. These are just women, regular British women, sitting in the street singing Sweet Caroline outside of outside of an asylum hotel, wearing pink shirts, right? Wearing pink shirts, just regular things, having a great old time. Right, just campaigning for the safety of their children. These are the kind of people that the establishment want to convince you are these disgusting Nazi-like figures. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Vast majority of people are just regular people that want their children to be safe. Want their children to be safe. Because they know, I'm not going to be able to go through everything I wanted to go through today. The police won't do it. And what is very, very much concerning is that it does seem that our country is no longer our own anymore. So I'm going to skip ahead over a couple of stories I was going to read, but I'll have to come back to next time. So this now was something very troubling that broke with GB News recently. And this should explain really a lot of things that are going on right now and why our country's in the state that it's in. The head of the article goes like this. Foreign royal family own more of London than King Charles as worrying trend laid bare. Despite the famous landmarks like Buckingham Palace being synonymous with London, the British royal family's personal foothold in the capital is dwarfed by another royal house. The House of Al Thani, the ruling of Qatar, have gradually built a real estate empire with huge construction projects and acquisitions of iconic landmarks. Across the capital, the royal family own a number of iconic palaces which serve as official residences, including Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, St. James's Palace, and Clarence House. Such estates are not considered private property and are instead owned by the sovereign on behalf of the nation. However, the Qataris have no such obligation with their growing portfolio in the capital. The Al Thani family's net worth is estimated to be around £2.4 billion, with the house's patriarch, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, said to be worth around £1.6 billion alone. As such, the families have built up an impressive collection of private houses in some of London's most salubrious areas. All in all, the Al Thani family is believed to own a staggering 1.8 million square feet of real estate in the capital. Northwestern Mayfair was dubbed Little Doha in reference to Qatar's capital city, due to high concentration of properties owned by the Al Thani family. The empire encompasses as much as a quarter of the area, including what may be Britain's most valuable private home. The palatial 44,000 square foot home was valued at £400 million in 2015, with Vanity Fair reporting that the late Queen Elizabeth quipped made Buckingham Palace look rather dull in comparison. So the trend is emerging, basically, that in many instances, London is not even owned by our own monarchs and our own royal family anymore. It's owned by a foreign royal family, and our capital of the country being owned by a foreign nation should be obvious that that is not good. And it should be obvious as to, again, another aspect of what's going on is that we don't own ourselves at this moment in time. We don't own ourselves. We are owned by foreigners. I'm sorry if that's something you don't want to admit, but it's true. As an example, as I just read off. The Shard, both the capital and Europe's tallest building, is 95% owned by the state of Qatar. The London skyline is also several grand projects financed and owned by Qatari rulers. Canary Wharf is co-owned by the Gulf States Sovereign Wealth Fund. Heathrow Airport, projected to service 84.2 million travellers in 2025, also falls under the Qatari Investment Authority umbrella, with 20% a share being held by the state. Sainsbury's is also 14.3% owned by the Qataris. This is worrying. This is worrying. In fact, it does seem to explain a lot of why King Charles's remarks have been the way that they are, where they've been a lot of the times fundamentally anti-Christian, very pro-Islam, pro-Muslim, right? To the extent that he starts off his addresses with Alhamdulillah, right? So this should say a lot. The fact that our royal family, this is why I said monarchists, I think the monarchy is dead, should tell you everything you need to know. Our monarchy, supposed monarchy, doesn't even own the majority, not just all of it, doesn't even own the majority of London. The Qatari royal family do. So something really needs to be done, doesn't it? Something really needs to be done. Does explain a lot about why things are turning out the way that they are, though. But until it's changed, we can expect it to get a hell of a lot worse. Because make no mistake, the Qataris do not have our best interests in mind. And that'll do it for the show today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching, as always. Hope you not so much enjoyed it, but found it useful. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, good night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. And you take care now. Godspeed.